Hi everyone, welcome back to the next and probably last part of Charles Dickens' The Haunted House. I said yesterday that it got a bit bizarre, and it gets even more bizarre as I read into this. I'm not sure what was in Dickens' head, but obviously he thought it made sense. Anyway, let's plough into it, shall we? Do you remember yesterday that the proposition was that they should have a seraglio or seraglio, which is another name for a harem? So there we go, let's see what happens. The other creature assented warmly. He had no notion of respectability, neither had I. It was the custom of the East, it was the way of the good Caliph Harun al-Rashid. Let me have the corrupted name again for once. It is so scented with sweet memories. The usage was highly laudable and most worthy of imitation. Oh, yes, let us, said the other creature with a jump, have a seraglio. It was not because we entertained the faintest doubts of the meritorious character of the Oriental establishment we proposed to import that we perceived it must be kept a secret from Miss Griffin. It was because we knew Miss Griffin to be bereft of human sympathies and incapable of appreciating the greatness of the great Harun. Mystery impenetrably shrouded from Miss Griffin, then let us entrust it to Miss Buell. We would tell him Mrs. Griffin's establishment by Hampstead Ponds, 8 ladies and 2 gentlemen. Miss Buell, whom I judged to have attained the ripe age of 8 or 9, took the lead in society. I opened the subject to her in the course of the day, and proposed that she should become the favourite. Miss Buell, after struggling with diffidence, so natural too, and charming in her adorable sex, expressed herself as flattered by the idea, but wished to know how it was proposed to provide for Miss Pipson. Miss Buell, who was understood to have vowed towards the young lady a friendship, halves and no secrets until death, on the church service and lessons, complete in 2 volumes with case and lock, Miss Buell said she could not, as a friend of Pipson, disguise from herself or me that Pipson was not one of the common. Now, Miss Pipson, having curly light hair and blue eyes, which was my idea of anything mortal and feminine that was called fair, I promptly replied that I regarded Miss Pipson in the light of a fair Circassian. And what then? Miss Buell pensively asked. I replied that she must be inveigled by a merchant and brought to me veiled. Now, shall I not be jealous? Miss Buell inquired, casting down her eyes. So biddy, no, I replied. You will ever be the favourite sultana. The first place in my heart and on my throne will be ever yours. Now Miss Buell, upon that assurance, consented to propound the idea to her 7 beautiful companions, it occurring to me in the course of the same day that we knew we could trust a grinning and good-natured soul called Tabby, who was the serving drudge of the hearse. There were difficulties in the formation of the desired institution, as there were in all combinations. Now the other creature showed himself of a low character, and when defeated in aspiring to the throne, pretended to have conscientious scruples about prostrating himself before the Caliph. The smiles that were bestowed when Miss Griffin was looking another way, only then in a very wary manner, for there was a legend among the followers of the Prophet that she saw with a little round ornament in the middle of the pattern on the back of her shawl. But every day after dinner for an hour we were all together, and then the favourite and the rest of the royal harem competed who should most beguile the leisure of the serene Harun, reposing from the cares of state, which were generally, as in most affairs of state, of an arithmetical character, the commander of the faithful being a fearful boggler at a sum. Miss Griffin was a model of propriety, and I am at a loss to imagine what the feelings of the virtuous woman would have been if she had known that when she paraded us down Hampstead Pond Road 2 and 2, that she would be walking into with a stately step at the head of a polygamy. I believe that a mysterious and terrible joy with which she contemplated of Miss Griffin in this unconscious state inspired us, and a grim sense of prevalent amongst us that there was a dreadful power in our knowledge of what Miss Griffin, who knew all things that could be learnt out of a book, didn't know, were the mainspring of the preservation of our secret. It was wonderfully kept, but was once upon the verge of self-betrayal. The danger and escape occurred upon a Sunday. We were all 10 ranged in a conspicuous part of the gallery at church, with Miss Griffin at our head. I have called the Seraglio united upon the question solely whether the commander of the faithful durst exercise a right of kissing in that sanctuary of the palace where its peerless inmates are divided. Zubaydi asserted a counter right in the favourite to scratch, and the fair Circassian put her face for refuge into a green baize bag, originally designed for books. On the other hand, a young antelope of transcendental beauty from the fruitful plains of Camden Town, whence she had been brought by traders in the half-yearly caravan that crossed the intermediate desert after the holidays, held more liberal opinions, but stipulated for limiting the benefit of them to that dog and son of a dog, the Grand Vizier, who had no rights and was not in question. At length, difficulty was compromised by the installation of a very youthful slave as deputy. She raised upon a stool, officially received upon her cheeks the salutes intended by the precious Haroun for other sultanas, and was privately rewarded from the coffers of the ladies of the Haroun. One day we were out walking, 2 and 2, on which occasion the vizier had his usual instructions to take note of the boy at the turnpike, and if he profanely gazed, which he always did, at the beauties of the harem, to have him bowstrung in the course of the night. And it happened that our hearts were veiled in gloom. An unaccountable action on the part of the antelope had plunged the state into disgrace. That charmer, on the representation that the previous day was her birthday, and that vast treasures had been sent in a hamper for its celebration, both baseless assertions, had secretly but most pressingly invited 35 neighbouring princes and princesses to a ball and supper, with a special stipulation they were not to be fetched till 12. Under these circumstances, we were walking drearily along, and I, especially with my Mussulman responsibilities heavy on me, was in a very low state of mind, when a strange man accosted Miss Griffin, and after walking on at her side for a little while and talking with her, looked at me. Supposing him to be a minion of the law, and that my hour was come, I instantly ran away with the general purpose of making for Egypt. The whole Seraglio cried out, and when they saw me making off, with fast as my legs could carry me, I had an impression that the first turning on the left and round by the public house would be the shortest way to the pyramids. Miss Griffin screamed after me, the faithless vizier ran after me, and the boy at the turnpike dodged me into a corner like a sheep and cut me off. Nobody scolded me when I was taken and brought back. Miss Griffin only said with a stunning gentleness that this was very curious. Why had I run away when the gentleman looked at me? If I had any breath to answer with, I dare say I should have made no answer, having no breath. I certainly made none. Miss Griffin and the strange man took me between them and walked me back to the palace in a sort of state, but not at all, as I couldn't help feeling, and with astonishment, in a culprit state. When we got there, we went into the room by ourselves, and Miss Griffin called into her assistance Mesrour, chief of the guards at the harem. Mesrour, on being whispered to, began to shed tears. "Bless you, my precious," said the officer, turning to me. "Your pa's took bitter bad." I asked with a fluttering heart, "Is he very ill?" "Lord temper the wind to you, my lamb," said the good Mesrour, kneeling down, that I might have a comforting shoulder for my head to rest upon. "Your pa's dead." Haroun al-Rashid took to flight at the words. The seraglio vanished from that moment. I never again saw one of the 8 of the fairest of the daughters of men. I was taken home, and there was debt at home as well as death, and we all had a sale there. My own little bed was superciliously looked upon by a power unknown to me, hazily called the trade, that a brass coal scuttle, a roasting jack, and a bird cage were obliged to be put into it to make a lot of it, and then it went for a song. So I heard mentioned, and I wondered what song, and thought what a dismal song it must have been to sing. Then I was sent to a great cold, bare school of big boys, where everything to eat and wear was thick and clumpy without being enough, where everybody large and small was cruel, where the boys knew all about the sale before I got there, and asked me what I had fetched, and who had brought me, and who hooted at me. Going on. I never whispered in that wretched place that I had been Haroun, or that I had a seraglio. For I knew that if I mentioned my reverses, I should be so worried that I should have to drown myself in the muddy pond near the playground, which looked like the beer. Ah me. No other ghost has haunted the boys' room, my friends, since I have occupied it, than the ghost of my own childhood, the ghost of my own innocence, the ghost of my own airy belief. Many a time have I pursued the phantom, never with this man's stride of mine to come up with, never with these man's hands of mine to touch it, never more to this man's heart of mine to hold it in its purity. And here you see me working out, as cheerfully and thankfully as I may, my doom of shaving in the glass, a constant change of customers, of lying down and rising up with the skeleton allotted to me, my mortal companion. So there we go. We now end that story rather bizarrely, and obviously a lot of the references were of its time, but there we go. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk soon. I'll read you some more Charles Dickens, but maybe not these ghost stories. Till next time, stay safe, be good, most will be kind.